I made a slat wall feature for our home office, and I went back and forth on how I was going to build this. And then I stumbled across a great video from Spencer Lewis from Insider Carpentry on how he built one for a client's home. He has a great video, and I will leave a link to that video down in the video description for those that are interested. This turns out to be the perfect job for the Lamello Zeta P2, and that is how I am going to be making it. This feature starts with a substrate. This is going to attach directly to the wall and provide a backer for the slats and where all of my slots for the connectors will be cut. I cut the panel to rough size and do a quick test fit so I can go ahead and establish my scribe line for the corner. And as you can see, I do have a pretty decent gap that I need to get rid of. After getting my scribe line, I went back into the shop and used my track saw to cut a 15-degree back bevel just off of the line. I then used my sander to fine-tune that edge and sand it right to that line. And if you want to find out more about this scribing technique that I'm using, I do have a video specifically for this. I'll leave a link to that in the video description as well. One last check to make sure that everything is tight against the wall, and I'm very, very pleased with that result. Now, this is where the tedious part of this project starts. A bunch of layout and a bunch of slot cutting. The first measurement that I take is establishing where I want to plunge the lamello and how many connectors I plan on using. Now, you will see me cutting 5. However, I did only use 3 for the majority of the slats. The total height of this slat wall is 62 inches. I did use 5 on a few slats that were really wonky after ripping them down, and this ensured that they stayed straight once they were clipped in. Once I had my marks, I could transfer those marks all the way across the board. I also want to highlight all of my measurements are off of the non-scribed edge, as that is a perfectly straight edge. Next, I focused on the spacing of the slats. There were a few things that I needed to know here. First, how thick did I want my slats to be? Second, what did I want my spacing to be? Now, when I cut my backer, I had those measurements in mind and made sure that I cut it so I would have even spacing. The easiest way of doing this is to mark the center line of the slats. So here's an example. I wanted a 3/4 inch gap from the edge to start. Then I need to add 3/8 of an inch to the center of the first slat. Each slat is 3/4 of an inch. Now from that first line, I can make a mark every 1.5 inches. Hopefully that makes sense. After everything is marked at the top and the bottom, I extend the lines, which you will see why here in the next step. Now, the center line of the lamello is exactly 3/8 of an inch from the bottom of the machine. And this is what I am using as a reference for all of my plunges. I am using the track as a straight edge, but I added a couple of 3/8 inch blocks, which is what I will be using to line up with my marks. This ensures the cutter is cutting in the center of the lines exactly. After they are lined up on both ends, I clamped them in place with a couple of spring clamps. From there, it is just a matter of moving from line to line and plunging the lamello over and over again. In all honesty, once you get going, it's actually incredibly fast. After those are done, I use the same marks to plunge into the side, which will be the visible edge. I will be adding a full depth slat at the end as a cover. Since everything was basically ready for installation, it was time to paint my backer. I even got a little help from my son, Leo.
Daddy, that looks really good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It looks really good?
Yeah.
Like how good?
Really good.
Happy New Year. Apparently, I'm doing a good job. You're doing a great job. Good job. Next, I focused on the slats. I milled everything down to exactly 3/4 of an inch thick, cut all of my strips to 1 1/8 inch wide, and followed it with a quick sanding of all the slats. I actually opted not to go with any finish on the slats because I did not want to alter the natural color of this white oak. Next, I set up some stops on my assembly table that I could use as a reference to make sure that all of the pieces were even. Then I was able to mark the locations of multiple slats at the same time. I figured this was a far better option than doing each one individually. I used the exact same measurements and I referenced the bottom of the slats because I left the slats long so I could actually cut them individually to fit perfectly during the installation. And again, just a whole bunch of plunging. And also a whole lot of adding Tenso connectors. Install time. Because there are so many rows of slats, I was able to hide the screws behind where the slats would be. Once the backer was drilled in, it was literally as easy as just snapping the slats in place. I'll go ahead and shut up now so you can listen to the sweet sound of easy. The install process made everything worth it. This is a great application for an already outstanding tool. We are so happy with how it turned out, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks.